good morning. So this morning I'm going to make a beautiful dark rye sourdough loaf. So this is using 50% of organic dark rye flour. This is a ship to mill one I'm using here, really nice flour, with organic stone ground white flour, again shipped to mill, and a lovely rye starter. I got that going last night, so lovely and bubbly. That'll be fantastic in there. So again, rye in this as well, so really up bumping up the rye. Just to make it even more rye, a friend of mine gave me some organic rye flakes here. So I'm going to add these in as an addition or an inclusion into it. So these are really, really coarse, lovely flakes. So they're kind of being crushed rather than kind of powdered down. So that's going to really add a lot of crunch to it. So I use that on top of the loaf and also inside. So probably about 50 grams on top, maybe about 50 grams as an inclusion inside the loaf. So give a lovely crunch and also a lovely, more of the rye flavour in there. So that's really good. So I've got 600 grams of flour in here. So 300 grams of the dark rye and 300 grams of the organic bread flour. And so to that, I'm going to put 450 grams of water in there. So this is filtered water. Just put my machine on here. Okay. So 451. That's really good. So I'm going to mix that in now. Well, normally I just use a spoon first of all, and I use my hands just to finish off this. So I'll stop there and I'll mix it up, and then I'm going to autolyse this for between half an hour and say an hour, somewhere around about there. You haven't got to be too exact on this. So after I mixed it, put it to one side after I'm kind of ready for the autolyzation and kind of getting the dough strength, because this is going to be important to get good dough strength into this mix, because there's much less gluten in rye flour, so there's much less chance for aeration going on there. So you've really got to work quite hard to get a nice light loaf. You're never going to get the same aeration as you have. If you have 100% bread flour, you're going to get a big buffy aerated loaf, and that's really lovely to have. But this is more of a really wholesome, nutrient-rich, high in fibre sourdough bread mix to use. So here we go. So I'll mix this up and I'll come back to you in about half an hour's time. That's great. Thank you. Okay, that's great. That's been half an hour. So what I'll do now, so that's been autolyzing for, let's say, half an hour. Now I add in my little bubbly rice starter. So I'm going to add in 120 grams of the starter, nicely aerated. I kind of know roughly what it is now, so I can measure it looking at the jar as to how much 120 grams in. But for you, you might want to actually, well, depending on how long you'll be making sourdough bread for, you might want to actually measure the starter out. But for me, I can do a pretty good job actually of measuring that out like that. So that's 120 grams on there of the rice starter. And I'm going to add in, this is kind of 2% roughly, or a little bit less than 2%. So if you say, I normally go for 12 grams of, this is sea salt in here. So that's it. So heaped teaspoon of that for me is 12 grams. That's perfect. Now, so what I'm going to do now, just wet my hands, and now I'm just going to mix that through so everything's mixed in together. And so once it's been all mixed in together, I'll come back to it after half an hour and I'll do this first set of stretch and fold. So I'll just go through and mix that quickly and then come back to you again in half an hour. Great. Right, great. That's been 30 minutes since we've mixed the starter in with the salt. I'm just going to kind of show you now where we're at as far as dough strength is concerned. This is the area we're going to have to work out the most really for this, because we've got such a high content of rye flour in there. We're going to have to kind of work a bit harder to get the dough strength. So here's where I know. So if I do a window pane test on here now, really very little. It just falls apart. So very little dough strength in there now. So we'll start on the first set of stretch and folds. So wet the hands, bring it out, release it from the bowl, and do our first set of stretch and folds. So this is all about kind of starting to get the strands going, get the dough strength into the dough. So there we go. So that's first one there. It's really quite a solid mass of dough at the moment. And if we check again now, You're probably going to find again now that there's not going to be a great, no, it's still just breaking there. So really still no real dough strength in the dough. So we'll come back to this again in half an hour's time, go through another set of stretch and folds. Okay, that's been half an hour. Let's see what we've got and give it another set of stretch and folds. So again, wet the hands. Just lift it out of the bowl. And we're going to give it a stretch. So it's starting to get a little bit elastic there, feeling slightly different. Feeling a little bit more like it's got some dough strength to it. You're going to get the feel for it after a while. So going one more going here, then we'll just have a bit of a test really. I don't expect it to be ready quite yet, because as I say, it is quite coarse with the rye flour in there. So let's have a quick look at the dough strength on here. So still, it's getting better. I mean, actually there is some dough strength in there now. That's actually improving. So that's good, not perfect, but actually we are getting some dough strength in there now. So you can't quite see my finger through it, it's breaking up, but that's pretty good actually for this level of wholemeal, whole grain rye flour in there. So we'll just do this again here, put it back in here, put the lid on again, and come back to it again in another half an hour. And I think actually we are making progress there. So another set of 1 or 2 stretch and folds, and we're getting to a point then probably where we can let it to go through its bulk proof. Okay, great, this is another half an hour, so I'll just check and we'll do another set of stretch and folds. Right, so just release that from the bowl. So it's getting a bit of a better feel to it now. It's starting to kind of feel as though it's coming together, and there actually is some dough strength building up in there. So yeah, I'm kind of happy there now. Well, actually, we'll just have a check. We'll just have a quick check on the dough strength on here and just see what we've got to. So, yeah, that's actually, for this level of rye flour, actually, that's pretty good now. I'm pretty happy that's not quite there, but it's getting there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in the rye flakes. So I'm just going to go through and just dimple the dough. It's kind of allowing us to get some, well, for the flakes to kind of get into the dough a little more easily. So I take that, and I'm going to probably put roughly, I'd say 50 grams in here, but I can kind of approximate that. So there we go, it's probably about 30 grams there, and maybe one more as well on there, not quite so much. That's probably loosely around about 50 grams of rye flakes in there. So now we're going to wet our hands again, just go through and kind of dimple it into, actually no, sorry, before that, just stop myself there. I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil in here because I think it helps to soften it a little bit. So I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil there, probably about 20 grams of olive oil in there, not very much, just enough to soften it really. You don't have to do that, it's kind of optional, you choose. Right, so now I'm going to kind of just dimple that through and try and push it in. So you can do this a bit until you're kind of happy that it's starting to kind of go into the dough. Squeeze it from the side there. It's really going to help the flavour and of course the nutritional content as well, because you've got even more whole grains in the finished bread, and of course then you're increasing the fibre content. So you really are making a lovely healthy loaf of bread here, and also tasty. I mean, you know, rye flour has got a very distinctive, beautiful flavour to it. So, you know, that's really key as well. So I'm kind of happy now it's starting to kind of move in. See, it's disappearing into the dough, which is great. So just pull it away from the edges here again. Okay, that's looking good. Now I'll just do a little bit of a fold on here again. So again, wet the hands and up on the stick. And we're just going to lift it up out of the bowl. And then we're going to fold it over on here. And do a little bit of a stretch and fold here again now. So I think probably we can do one more set after this. This means we're kind of building up the dough strength again, and we're also mixing through the rye flakes and the olive oil, so it gets through the dough. So there you go. I'm really pleased with that. So I'm now going to leave that again for another half an hour. Come back, check that again. But I think that's looking really good. It's going to kind of getting the feel now of a nice springy dough. So I'm pleased with that. So okay, I'll put it back again, and in half an hour's time we'll come back and we'll stretch and fold again. Thank you. Okay, that's great. That's been another half an hour. So we'll just check it and do a final set stretch and fold. So again, just wet my hands. So okay, we're going. So okay, it's feeling better on there. That's feeling good. So you kind of feel now it's really coming together, and there's some dough strength to it. It's feeling like a normal dough now. Of course, because we've got the high rye grain content in there, it's a little bit different. So we'll just have a quick check now on the dough strength on here. So, well, that's really good now. I mean, it's tearing a bit. Let's actually just try that again on here. We have got the rye flakes in here. You know, I think that's really looking good. As you can see though, the rye flakes kind of making it tear a bit as they kind of break into it. But you know, that's looking really good actually. I'm happy with that now for dough strength. So for this level of rye grain content, I think we've got some good dough strength. So I was going to give it a couple of final stretch and folds. I think this will be the point now where I'll say we're ready to do its bulk rise. So there we go. So that really is finished now as for stretching and fold. It's got good dough strength to it. Not as good as you would do if you had like pure or 100% bread flour in there, but looking good for this. We're never going to get the same level of aeration or gluten strength in there as we have in just the bread flour. But looking good. This is going to be a very tasty loaf, full of real goodness, full of rye flour. As I say, 50% rye flour, so that's a really high content for sourdough bread making. So let's put it to one side for like maybe between 4 and 5 hours now, and come back to it to shape it, fold it, and put it into the Valentine. So that's really great. So thanks for that, and we'll come back in 4 or 5 hours time and we'll be ready to go to the next stage. Okay, great. Well, that's been about 4 hours now. I think we're looking about right. So let's have a quick look in here and see if it's finished the proofing process. So just give that a little bit of a test on here. Just very slowly coming back on here. Finger again. Yes, I'm really happy with that. I think that's the perfect stage now to put it to form it and into the basket, into the Valentine. So here we go. So I'll just do that for you now. So obviously dust up with rice flour, your Valentine on here. That's ready to go. That's great. So a little bit of dust on the bench, not too much, a little bit of rice flour on the bench. That's really good there. And also I'm going to coat this now with a bit more of the bran flakes. So put those out on the bench here, just right so you can coat the surface. So I'm just going to spread those out on here, so we're going to get a nice surface of the rye flakes. That's great. So let's go through and form up the dough. So let's put it out of here. That's feeling good now. It's feeling really good. So we're going to stretch that out. It's probably going to be stickier than a lot of other flours that you work with, because you've got the high level of rye flour in there. So you're going to be pretty quick on it now. I'm going to have to really quite wet fingers to make this work. Okay, so stretch it out, fold it over. Yeah, that's perfect. So you can see how kind of like how lovely that looks on here. And then we're just going to go through here now and coat with the rye flour. You're really good coating all the way around. It's looking pretty good on there. Put there as far as you can. great. So happy with that. That's well coated. Put it into the batter now, on here. We're now going to go through and do some kind of, okay, stretch it across on here just to kind of build in some tension on the loaf on there. That's good. Stitch it in on there. That's looking good. Okay, happy with that. That's really good. Now the last thing to do really there is to just dust a little bit of rice flour on the outside. Looks really good. So I'm sticking, and that's great. So I'm happy with that now. So this probably now I'm going to leave a little bit longer out than I would do normally, because you know it's quite a dense loaf with all the rye flour in there. So put your balance, put your cover on here, and I'd say leave this out now. I'd say for about 45 to 50 minutes on the bench, just to give it a little bit of a more of a chance to rise, and then put it into the fridge overnight. So there we go. Just going to use up these last little bits here and put them on top. And that's great. So I'll come back. So there we go. So I'll come back to this in about 45 minutes time and then put it in the fridge. That's great. Thank you. Okay, great. So that's been in the fridge overnight. So the oven's been on, heating up for 45 minutes. So that's got up to temperatures. That's 240 degrees C. So I'll get the Dutch oven out and we'll get baking. Great. Okay, so that's looking lovely. That's risen a little bit in the fridge, but just a little bit. There we go. Nice big loaf. So I'm just going to do one nice clean cut across the top here on this one. And down there. Just check we got it all the way through. It's looking good. There, beautiful. Taking extra care with the slash here because of the type of loaf it is. So that's looking good. That's opening up beautifully. In goes my ice cubes. Lid on. Beautiful. Right, so that's going to go in the oven now. That's for 240 for 20 minutes. And then I'll take the lid off. We'll have a look at it, and then another 20 minutes in the oven. So thank you. I'll come back in 20 minutes. Okay, great. That's been 20 minutes. We'll get it out of the oven and see what we've got. Wow, it's looking great. Fantastic. There you go. Nice crumb on there, lifted well for that level of rye flour in there. That's looking really nice and light. So really pleased with that. Fantastic looking loaf. Put it back in the oven again for 20 minutes. Turn it down to about 220 now. And there we go. That's great. So let's get it out of the oven and have a look. See what we've got. Well, that's fantastic. Look at that. So that is a rye loaf. That's 50% rye flour, another 100 grams of rye flakes in there, 50 grams inside and 50 on top, and also with a rye starter. So that's really it's a really high concentration of rye. And you can see this like cracking on here. That's what happens when you have kind of more of the whole grain flours in there. But that'll be a delicious loaf. Really tasty. So looking forward to eating that. That's going to be really beautiful. And a really healthy, tasty loaf. Different, of course, to what you get when you're baking with just bread flour. You're going to get a much higher rise on there. But you can see already you've got a good hydration coming through it, so that's going to be a lovely loaf, and really healthy and very tasty. So I'd recommend having a go at making sourdough breads with high concentrations of rye flours and wholemeal flours, particularly with rye flours, because this is probably the flour with the least amount of protein in it and the hardest to get into a lovely aerated loaf. And this looks to be beautiful, so really pleased with that. And a lovely kind of crumb on here with the flakes. So yeah, fantastic. So I'll put that onto the rack now. Enjoy that for breakfast this morning. So thanks for watching.